provide on the Learn page. I'll provide a link to current recordings. I don't get rid of the old recordings. I always produce a YouTube playlist that's there with the old recordings. You can go through and check some other stuff if you're wanting to jump ahead of where we're at, all that sort of thing. By all means, have a look at these things. Certainly ask me if anything's changed, but really nothing much has changed with this subject, content-wise, project-wise, etc. Some minor changes with the updated NCC, but that's into the future. Because we're not, as I said, I was just speaking to Army within the break, but it's relevant to all of you, is that the way it's structured is you've got to do the planning approval part for project 1 before you do the building rules consent part. So building rules, that doesn't actually start until I think week 4 or week 5. So for those that are doing building rules consent, we don't actually start that. So we've got the afternoon class scheduled in for building rules consent, but I'll be spent for the first 4 to 5 weeks. I'll be spending that on planning approval things. And that's another thing, and I should gauge everybody's opinion on that. So we've got this class until 1 o'clock, and then we break for a 1 hour lunch, and then there's the building rules class that starts at 2 to 4:30 today. Can all of you make it? Can you not make that 2 to 4:30? What are your movements like? You've got a class after? You can't make it?
So that's the same subject as this one, but...
It is, yes, because we have to get the planning approval for project 1 done earlier. I try to make it as intensive as possible at the start, and you can't start building rules consent. So basically, I make myself available for spending that class on planning stuff to get us moving forward. Now, obviously, if the class can't do that, then I won't do that, right? We'll have to, but it's something I think, but the two of you are able to do that. You all right for doing that? Not. Yeah, and people, you're enrolled in both, so you've seen the timetable. It's there. What I will do is, look, I'll do it a little bit. Look, I'll cram everything into this planning approval 1 to get you going. Yeah, look, it's really unfair for me for the first few weeks to be running any sort of classes, so to speak, in that bit, given the makeup of class and people's timelines. But for you, particularly because you've got a lot on, I'm going to have to get you ahead and pushing through stuff. I think if I could meet up with you again at that 2 o'clock bit today, we won't go all the way till 4:30. It's just you and I. I'll get ball rolling with some stuff, get you ahead. So. Good. Cool. And that's what it's going to be like with this class. Is really you're all going to be at different speeds. It does become a bit of a schmozzle at times, and I'm a bit like, I can't remember the. And I'll have to be reminded, or I'll go, oh, that's right, you were having to do that thing today. That's going to happen because you're all going to be at different speeds. That's for me to manage and for you to help me out managing it. But yeah, as I said before, my prerogative is that you all flourish, that you all learn as much as you can, that you all pass, and yeah. So that's what I'm here for, to help make sure that can happen as best as possible. So now we understand basically the broader concepts of what planning and building approval is about, and that information we have to supply and who we have to supply that information to, etc., and the nature of that information. And obviously, we're going to learn a lot more about all of that as we keep progressing through, and you'll learn a lot more of that progressing throughout your careers. Now we're going to have a bit of a session on what the subject
includes. So click on before you start. So plenty of stuff in here. Now with the new Learn page, I saw it for the first time last night because I've actually took a little bit of extended leave because I hadn't taken much leave beforehand. Got some stuff on. About time to spend some time with the family as well. So I just had a look at all this stuff last night. Yeah, it's all very new. It's a bit new to me, so bear with that. But I think I've got a handle on it. It's not too different. But there's all these bits here saying edit section, whatever. Because I'm a lecturer, it's automatically in edit mode. I don't know. Yeah, you won't see it on yours because you can't. You're not allowed to. But I don't know how to have a classroom thing, or maybe we can't have a classroom view. Anyhow, so I've got all these things pop up there. So there's learning program not published to students, because rather than just go deleting stuff and getting rid of it from the Learn page, I just hide stuff because I might want to pull it out again and do things like that. But in the classroom view, it's all showing up there. So just be aware of that. Maybe I'll go through and delete stuff and store it externally, etc. But what I have put up here this morning is Semester 2 2019 Learning Program for Planning Approval, and then Semester 2 2019 Learning Program for Building Approval. First thing, I'll show you the Building Approval one first. So yeah, as you'll notice, so there's nothing in the first 4 weeks, because actually, no, that does go to the nature a little bit of planning and building approvals. Now, if I were, let's say I'm Rossdale Homes or something like that, or Rivergum Homes, what I would do is I would have my building, I'd have everything all nutted out for the building rules consent. I'd put it in for planning and I'd send it to the private certifier at the same time. It all happens at once. Bam, there we go. For other things, if you're pushing the envelope a little bit, doing some interesting stuff, not sure if it's going to get planning approval, you do a staged consent. You get it through planning approval first, and then once you know actually what you're building, you'll submit your building rules consent stuff. And you might work on both at the same time. You might even wait till you've had planning approval before you start working on your building rules consent, because you're really not sure if you're going to get it through, or whether it's going to look anything like your first submission. So the way this is structured, it's like a staged building rules consent, where you're doing planning first, then you're doing building rules consent. And then if we flick all the way through that, right to the end of semester, here we go, it's going over 3 pages, you go right up to that week 15, and then week 16 is resubmission week. That's just tidying up any of the little elements. Looking at that in comparison to the learning program for planning approval, okay, there we go. That starts week 1. So week 1 today, we're getting into stuff. So functional cluster studies, learning program, what is planning approval, why do we need planning approval, access to NCC, development plans, covered all that. What we haven't really talked about yet is, well, we've talked about it, file and folder setup. We'll talk about that a little bit now. Yeah, so we'll get into that. But looking through this, there's a lot to be done every week, and you've got this says what we're doing each week, and this is its due date. So week 1 Wednesday, so that's in 2 days' time, is council project requirements. We'll be working through that in class. That's fine. Should not be an issue. But you'll notice there that there's a lot of stuff due, and it all happens in a sequential fashion. So you're just handing out lots of stuff. You're doing lots of stuff throughout the whole time. look, I work with you as much as possible and I'm as flexible as possible, but the sequential nature and having to go through this step before this step can't really be mucked with too much. So, but then we work our way through that 13 weeks or so, and we get to a bit here in the planning approval stage where it's week 14, resubmission week, and then those things are scheduled in. Well, that's done in the building rules consent. So really, at this point in time, if you've kept up to date with everything, just gone bop, there's a whole month right at the end there where you can go, all right, cool, I'm going to work on other subjects. I can do other things. That's best case scenario. Some of you will push into this a bit. As I said before, it's a little bit flexible. But if everything goes well, then planning approval people get done a little bit early. So all your due dates, well, when things are due are here. So we've got week 1 Wednesday, you've got your date there. Previously I have actually have put my dates all in here as well, but it's a massive thing. It takes me almost an hour to go working through all that, and I thought, well, actually, if I was reading this, I could just go week 1 Wednesday. Oh, that's the 31st of the 7th. Right. So that's how to read that. So you've got your timelines there, your learning program. I'm not about cutting down trees and turning them into paper, but print that one out. Have it handy. You're going to be referring to that all the time. And yeah, things will be a little bit flexible, but basically that's our guide for working through it. So I expect you to understand that timetable and to have that. So do get a copy of that. In fact, look, there's so few people in class. Look, I'll print that out for you, actually. Everyone wants a copy, do they? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, look. My apologies to all the externals that are watching this video. I'm not going to print it and send it to you in the snail mail. You have to print it yourself. But yeah, got some limitations. Okay, and yep, that's fine. So, and yeah, I'll print off one of these. Go. Right. Then, under these, we've got our planning approval requirements and building approval requirements. That's the units of competency. So everything that we teach here is structured around these national units that, if this subject's being taught in New South Wales or the Northern Territory or wherever, they're fitting that same recipe. Now they might have a different approach to us. What it's all about is us lecturers have to read those units and go, okay, this is how I can make what I teach fit into this thing and assess to fit into that thing. If it's of any interest to you, have a read of that. See, okay, is Mike doing what that's saying? So to get a bit of an idea of it. Basically, it's my job to make sure that they're all met. But if you have any interest in it, by all means, have a read through. Then, like a lot of legislation, it's not a simple document. It's a sort of convoluted document that self-references, etc. But by all means, do that. Now, extension request. Yeah, we have a formal policy around extensions. It does get a little bit difficult in this class because we're doing so many activities. There's 48 assessments in planning approval, and another 36 or something within building rules consent. That's a lot of assessments, and I understand that everybody's going to be at a different pace. This is not so applicable for us, but if we're getting right to the end and we're having to sort things out and give MS grades and things like that to do some interesting stuff, I might need a form later on. If I need these things, I'll let you know. But if not, I'll manage that process primarily. For other subjects, it's going to be very different. Other subjects where you've got 1 or 2 major assessments and whatever, it has to be managed. Yes. Okay, accessing building codes of Australia, NCC free downloads. Yeah, you know about that. And accessing the Australian standards. I just want to check. Can everybody access the Australian standards through the library? Excellent. Now, so won't go through all of that. So yeah, once again, we've got these things that are not so relevant. Well, kind of cool key, haven't thrown it away. So they're there. Anything graded, not published to students. It's things that are just sort of kept there. Res Code fact sheet. So I spoke about Res Code before. We're not actually teaching that in this subject because it doesn't quite fit. So the unit of competency says you've got to do this thing, you've got to do that thing, that thing, that thing. Because it's a national unit of competency, but we have state-specific approaches and policies, some of these things just don't really fit. It's still an important thing for you to know. Last semester I did a presentation on what Res Code is. I've got that. If we've got time, I'll go into it. But the Res Code fact sheet is there for you to read. To go, oh yeah, well this is very applicable to what I'll be doing. I'll read it. What is sort of non-negotiable is the activity log. So I spoke about the filing systems before and recording things. One of the things you have to do is, well, you don't have to do. Look, you could just go out there, be a drafter, and not charge anybody anything for anything you ever do, right? It's probably not very sustainable. I don't know anybody who's done that before. So I think the majority of you will want to charge your clients money for what you're doing. In order to do that, you are going to want to charge relative to how much time you spend on something, and that's fair enough. You can't, and you can't really go making up other parameters for charging people. Really, it's by time. To justify that, if these things get called upon, you can say, well, look, I spent this much time on this thing at this point in time. There you go. That's why I'm charging this much. So you're going to have a letter of appointment with your client, and you're going to say, I'm going to charge you this much per hour. You can't say, the whole thing is going to cost $3,000. There you go. Right. Because one job might take a lot of time, another job might not take a lot of time. If you go just charge blanket fees, you'll lose all the people with the small jobs, and you get all the people with the big jobs, and you'll lose money. You've got to charge by your time. You can't always give a blanket fee. You can give an indication, and that is quite often what's done. So a drafter will say, I charge this much per hour. It's likely to be this many hours at this cost. But however you approach it, you've got to have your activity log. You've got to say, I did this at this point in time, both for charging, but also to say, this is what we've done, this is what we haven't done. Also, in the office I worked in, I wouldn't be the only person working on a project. There'd be other people working on a project, sometimes at exactly the same time, sometimes all staggered out. We had and that's how it's often done in an office, is to rather than use an Excel spreadsheet, it's done with Microsoft Access, which is a database program that enables people to be linking in with that, doing something like this, but it's all interlinked and it links back to the one file. So we'll have this one project. I'll type in my hours in my calendar, and that goes against that project. So that's typically what's done. But you will have to record your hours, you'll have to record your activity, and also information about what you've been sending where.
So is this what we have to do for a class now?
No, today's class you haven't been working on anything.
But I mean in general, we have to keep track of our activity.
Definitely. So for any of the projects that you're working on, you have to keep track of that activity. So yeah, so once you start working on a project, as we will on Wednesday, we'll get straight into it, start working on that project. Yeah, Wednesday 10 a.m. till 11:30, I worked on this. I did this. Right. So you'll have to do your activity log. Next bit in the Learn page, industry standards and instructions. So I said before, there are conventions. Now we have an Australian standard 1100.301 that defines some of the conventions, and that defines some of the really important points, like how do we nominate a door swing? Like, that everybody knows hinge, latch, hinge on your door shows that's the way the door opens. That has to be not universally, but that has to be an accepted way of showing which way a door swings. Because if you've got one person who thinks, oh, it goes latch, hinge, latch, or something, then you'll get builders hanging doors the wrong way. So we need some of these conventions that say that's how we do stuff. Like the piece of timber that's been cut through, timber with an X. Not everything is. There are standards, there are processes, there are accepted ways of doing things which aren't prescribed in AS 1100.301. You get, Australian standards don't always keep pace with things. I think that's fairly old. I can't remember what the date of that one is. It's fairly old. So there are many things that drafters do that aren't in that, and there are some things prescribed in that drafters don't do. But as a legal requirement, if you were to deviate from that exceptionally with things like door swings, whatever, then you as a drafter become legally responsible for rectification of the damage you've caused as a result. So we've got a bit of information here about passive design principles and sustainability. So councils want to know this sort of stuff. This is also written into the unit. We'll be covering that in a few weeks' time. Secure file storage and forwarding options. So we've got information on there. Now, with the new Learn, can I just drop that one down? Yeah, I can. So, a bit of information here. Password protected read-only files, save as PDF, saving files to the cloud, watermarking documents. That's mostly for people doing the building rules consent and the cluster with that. And that's primarily what you're going to have to be looking at toward the end. But by all means, for everybody, have a look through all this information and navigate your way through it tonight or tomorrow before we get together again on Wednesday. Actually, yeah. I'll let you read through most of it at your leisure. Partly because we won't have time to be really prescriptive in going through all of this. Yeah, office filing and protocol. So there's going to be some good guidelines there as to how you go filing things away. And our filing protocol for planning approval, that's a definite read. So you're going to have to start setting up your filing system. You probably want to set up your filing system either today, tomorrow, Wednesday. You really want to be doing that this week and setting up your filing system. You also have to meet the requirements of some of those other units later on, but things you have to do now is a filing log. So if you're receiving files and sending files, you keep a filing log. That's, I guess, partly that's a bit of an antiquated type thing. It's so, yes, units are written every now and again, and some of those things, well, we can't get them all taken out. So there are some antiquated things that are still kept in here. I apologise. I have to get you through those hoops. Relevant to some people, but it's becoming of less relevance. But yeah, having a filing log keeps, well, in a paper-based form, it keeps track of where those documents are. But also a filing log in a digital sense helps you keep track of who you have sent to, like sent what document to at what point in time, who knows what. And that can also be important information for you. So it's still important to keep track of what's happening with files. So you'll have to maintain your filing log. You'll have to maintain your activity log. The one under that drawing transmittal example, that's one that just hasn't been deleted. We've also got a bit of information here about working drawing basics and revision clouds. So we'll be looking at those in weeks to come. Because for now, we're going to start, or on Wednesday, we're going to be collating lots of information, pulling all that information together. We'll start drawing in a few weeks' time, or a bit over a week's time. So there's all those things in there. Yeah, have a look through, spend a bit of time on that, seeing what's here. But these one, filing log and activity log, are very important to you now, and also filing protocol for planning approval. Next one along, product information. Lots of really good stuff in here. So for those who recently had me for materials and methods, I would have got you to collate a whole heap of information and be pulling that all together. I mean, I think when I had you for materials and methods, we weren't doing that so much. But there's plenty of good stuff in here for you. So yeah, just great resources. You know, have a look through, glean what you can, read it, check it out. Yeah, pretty much it's going to be either applicable to planning rules or planning consent or building rules consent. Then, okay, showing correct information. Right. Project 1, planning. A one-story timber frame transportable with lightweight cladding is what we're going to be dealing with. So we've got a little transportable house type place that's going onto an allotment at number 174 Shepherds Hill Road in Bellevue Heights. You are given a Revit model for that. So yeah, what we're doing is we give you a file. Now that file is missing a whole heap of stuff, and you have to change things. You have to bring things in. You have to modify things. You have to add things. You're given the basic file for doing that. So everybody starts off with those same parameters. And yeah, look, I don't want you changing the pitch of the roof. Yeah, look, we don't need to make it any more complex than what it is. There's plenty of stuff. So you're given that basic template. Yeah, it's a bit boring, but you're working with that. So we get that Revit file. We also get a site survey, which is typically what you'll do. So one consultant you're going to be dealing with is a surveyor. Sometimes Well, quite often you're going to want to get a boundary survey done. It's going to cost you around that $1,000 in a residential sense, or a bit more in a semi-rural sense, that sort of thing. But you're going to want to have a boundary survey done, particularly if you're building on the boundary, because what you don't want to do is build on someone else's place. That, or build partly on someone else's place. That's a whole can of worms to sort out later. So if you're building on boundary or close to the boundary or so, you want that boundary survey done. But also in that process, and what's become really easy these days is contours. So it used to be a lot of work for drafters using the dumpy level to get heights, everything, and then interpolate that into a contour plan. Now, so surveyors use a thing called Trimble, which connects with satellites. They'll get their base point, and then they go around bit, create a point cloud. That point cloud creates contours. They'll produce a plan for you with all their contours. Now that's in a different program. It's not in CAD or Revit or so I worked with a surveyor over the break, just a little bit. Had him out doing stuff for me, and they do their point cloud in a different program, but then you can bring it into AutoCAD or Revit or so. But then some of your surveyor, or there's one surveyor I know of which does their point cloud in Revit, so it's banging it straight into that program that you're using. So anyhow, you can get all those points and get all those surveys done. We've given you a site survey, which it's in a Revit file, but you're going to have to do a lot of mucking around, as you know. So and that's the way it is. You get things in all sorts of different formats and whatever, and you've got to make that work. Surveys is one of those things. And pretty much for every building project you have, you're going to be working with contours. So, yeah, a little bit more information for that. But the main thing, and I encourage you to have a bit of a where we go, have a bit of a look at it. Also, in your spare time, is Project One procedure document. So each of the projects has a procedure document. That tells you how we're going about the project, tells you what we have to do, what you have to include. So that's your guide for every project. And then beyond that, if we go right down, we've got each of our assessment tasks. So as I mentioned before, I think it's 42 assessments or something in planning approval. They are things like doing task requirements, desktop research, client consult, and then reports, design and consult footings, etc. So you're going to be working through that and ticking each one of those off. Quite often more than one a week. Well, no, always it's going to be more than one a week. So yeah, you'll be burning through each of these tasks. What we've got to do on Wednesday within the class is this first one, task 1 requirements, and we'll probably get desktop research done in that same class as well. We'll probably get both of those knocked off on Wednesday. I don't see why we can't. Righto, any more questions before I wind things up for lunch? All good? All right, so everybody has access to that. Yeah, have a good read through it in your own time. Have a look at the requirements. Familiarise yourself with the information, and then we'll. Actually, Wednesday's class, I didn't look at what room that's in. Yeah, so but I'll see you on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Maybe in this room, maybe over in room 311. Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.